All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for our May 2023 STC Florida chapter meeting, Dungeons and Dragons, improving your tech comm skills through gaming. Before we get into the presentation, I just have a few slides to cover. Welcome from the Florida chapter of the Society for Technical Communication. We're glad you're here. And if you have any questions about STC or STC membership, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, I will definitely push those questions for down the road. So that'll be great for our next event in June that we'll be sharing with you. So, events. In case you didn't see it, this Saturday, if you like what you see about Dungeons and Dragons and you want to play, we have two options. We have a learn to play workshop if you have never played before and want to learn the rules. And we have a session, a game called Journey to the Witchlight Carnival for those who have played. You do not have to be super experienced. You just have to have some familiarity with the rules. And my husband will actually be running that game. He's very, very excited. I think he's working on it right now. So that'll be a really fun one. If you want to participate and you have not already signed up, let me make sure I grab the link. And yeah, just sign up and let us know which session you want to join. Another thing to mention, if you are interested in being more involved with STC, we do have our administrative council meeting on June 13th. Anyone is welcome to join, where we'll talk about chapter business, plans, events, get to see behind the scenes, behind the curtain. I don't want to say it's super exciting, but we have a good time and a good chat, and that's available for anyone. So if you're interested in that, let me know either in the chat or you can send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat if you want to reach out to me about anything that comes up tonight. And then I was mentioning, if you have questions about STC, you'll learn a lot about our chapter, our programs in general at our end of year celebration, which is June 15th. Normally we have a virtual networking meeting every month, but that session, instead of being an educational program, yes, we are classifying this as educational. Bear with me. We are claiming that the Dungeons and Dragons program will educate you. That one will just be fun. So we'll do awards, recognitions, and just catch up, chat about how the chapter year has gone and what we'd like to see in the year ahead. So I encourage you to join us for that. That one will be free. It'll be on Zoom. We do anticipate having some hybrid events, especially our leadership retreat in July. That'll be in person and online. So we're going to have a chance to reconnect in person for those who are able to, but still meet online for those who can't. So stay tuned. There'll be notices coming out, from our emails and various social media channels. And a quick note about some opportunities. Again, if you are not a member, we would love for you to join STC and the Florida chapter specifically, or if you have been a member but haven't renewed your membership, you can do that now. It is prorated, so you don't pay for the full cost of the year if you join midway through or renew. So if you want to look up about that, it's at stc.org, or you can let us know in the chat, or you can send me anything at that email. Well, don't send me anything at that email, anything pertaining to STC at that email. And then I'm going to hand it to Julia to talk a little bit how you could get published.
You want to write something about technology and communication, please reach out to me. I've also got some ideas on our memo to members ideas page, which I shall share to you in chat.
All right. Thanks, Julia. Also, if you're looking to expand your skills, your resume, or just hang out with us even more, we're always looking for volunteers. We have had some recent people step up. So Joy and Nicole are some recent volunteers that we've welcomed to the Florida chapter. But if you have some time to fill, or even if you don't, we'll take your time as it is available and see what we can do that would be a good fit for you to help you build the skills you want to. So again, reach out to me if that interests you at all. And then, sorry, I put these in the wrong order. I'm handing it back to Julia for the last item.
It's okay. We can do whatever order we want to. It's our slide.
It's true.
Students and FTC members, please share your accomplishments or the accomplishments. I can do words of another student in our accomplishments channel night by midnight. This is your last chance. I really want to brag about you, so please, please, please post something.
Thanks, Julia. Julia really does want to brag on people. It brings her a lot of joy. So just a quick look at our agenda. We're planning to cover a lot of ground and looking forward to, if you want to put anything in the chat as we go. I can't promise that we'll respond to everything as it's happening, but we'll try to keep an eye on it and then come back and gather any questions because there will be a Q&A at the end. But I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump right in. So, embarking on the quest, I called this the convergence of tabletop gaming and technical communication. I think something that I've felt as someone who's played Dungeons and Dragons and other games for a long time is that the skills that we use in our profession make us very successful players and also dungeon masters or game masters who run the game. And our writing and collaboration skills, it's nice to be able to hone those in a fun way in a fantasy setting. So while we might not like fight monsters in our day-to-day jobs in a literal sense, but sometimes in a metaphorical sense, we are. So it's nice to be able to look at how we can tackle challenges using communication, working with a team, doing research, and applying our critical thinking skills. So I remembered, and I sometimes forget to introduce myself, but I put a slide, so I'll make sure to remember for those who don't already know me. My name is Bethany Aguad. I'm the STC Florida chapter president, and I put that I'm an experienced Dungeons and Dragons player. That's mainly due to Rachel, who invited me to play a game one time, and then I never left, basically. I think, Rachel, you had to check me, was it like 10 years ago, maybe? It's around a decade
It was back
ago.
in the apartment, so yeah, like 10 years ago.
Yeah, we were young once, but we still play.
And I don't know if you remember, but we didn't even start with D&D. That very first one, I gave them Star Wars characters from a Star Wars saga game that I was playing, and I was like, "Here, let me pitch this to you," and they were all on board.
At first, I was like, "What is happening? I don't understand," but then it clicked once I got into it. So yeah, we'll focus mainly on Dungeons and Dragons in the presentation, but know that there is a whole world of other games. So if you're interested in the idea of playing a game, but you're like not into fantasy, there's everything. Like Rachel mentioned, Star Wars. There's things that are outside of fantasy, horror, all sorts of stuff. So you always can ask us about that outside of the session. We have lots of things we could share. So I'm going to let Julia introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Southwick. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the STC Florida Vice President, Communications Chair, Newsletter Editor, and I recently, I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Had a great time and look forward to our next game on Saturday.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I put new, but then I realized it has been a couple of years. The pandemic has distorted my sense of time. So everything that's happened in the last 3 years has happened in about 2 months in my brain. So it kind of all got condensed.
New is still fairly accurate. I'm not new, but new enough that it still counts.
There you go. And Rachel, who is our other presenter.
So I'm Rachel Swertfeger, and I helped out with STC. I do mentoring for Dominic, who's in the chat, and I am an experienced Dungeons and Dragons player as well as many other systems. So I have been playing since roughly 2005, starting with 3.5 all the way up through everything that I can get my grubby little mitts on, as Bethany knows.
Yes, Rachel once messaged me. We were going to a convention where they ran different games, and she's like, "There's one called Trash Pandas where you play as raccoons."
Do you want to play?
I was like, that sounds amazing. I don't understand it all, but I can't wait to find out. So, purpose of this presentation, like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover, but what we really want to do is highlight the overlap between some of the core skills in technical communication and in tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. So again, while this is mainly Dungeons and Dragons themed, these skills apply across different systems. The subtleties will change, the theming will change, but I think the core applications apply. We also want to show you like how you could enhance your skills, especially in communication and collaboration through playing and having a good time. So I'm going to hand it to Julia to explain what is Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game, or RPG, which was first published in 1974. You cooperate with other players, creating characters, one for you to play as. Each person has their own character, and you work together to accomplish whatever goal has been set for that session. Games are run by the Dungeon Master, DM, or Game Master, GM. It's the same role, just with a different name. They create story, They play all the NPCs, including whatever enemy characters you may or may not end up fighting. And you roll different kinds of dice to determine the outcome, which I have a set right here. You've got your classic die that you get in every board game ever, and then a bunch of special ones with different shapes.
Sorry, we should have shown our dice to establish our cred. I've got my Rachel. I remember my tiny dice.
Oh, those are cute.
They're for my purse in case there's a gaming emergency. So I'm gonna hand to Rachel to talk a little about the responsibilities of a dungeon master or game master.
Okay, so as we've already talked about, it's a little bit of like a collaborative storytelling experience for everybody at the table. But the dungeon master or game master usually has like a little bit of a heavier lift. They're usually the ones in charge of kind of crafting the world, presenting everything. If you're familiar with video games, think of the GM is the video game. So they're the NPCs, they're the weather, the time, literally everything. And the players get to say what they're doing. So just a small example, I'd be like, you find yourselves in a room, it's made of solid stone. There's a small rickety bed in the corner and two doors, one to the north and one to the west. What do you want to do? And then the players get to say what they want to do. And then if they're doing something, I would then call for a roll and then we decide what's going on. So then I get to also determine how well they do based on their dice rolls. They also are a bit of a project manager because they run and schedule the game, as Bethany and I both tend to do. We make agendas for our games.
Doodle poll for scheduling.
Doodle polls for scheduling. So it's a lot of herding cats at that stage of it. Encouraging creativities. We do prompt players, especially if they're new. And you don't know what you're doing. You're like, well, you're a ranger, so you're really good at like shooting things from afar. You can kind of stealth in the woods. You know, we're in the woods, so you would have more of an advantage. And we can kind of prompt you and give you ideas. But ultimately, what you decide to do with your character is, for the most part, on you, unless it's something just you're like, I want to fly into the sky, and you're like, this is a fantasy game. I'm sorry, there's no flying.
Unless you have flying, but
unless
you don't have flying, you're not powerful enough to have flying yet.
Right. So being fair, a lot of times it's called sharing the spotlight. So if you have a group of players and let's say 4 of them are a little bit more chatty, a little bit more outgoing, a way to keep it nice and fair is every so often kind of call on that person who's a little bit more introverted, but in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable. So you have to learn to kind of read the room, read the table. You might say, hey, I noticed your character hasn't been doing anything. Is there something you wanted to do? Or what is your character thinking? Or how does your character feel about what's happening, to kind of get them into the game and keep everybody included and having a chance to say and do what their character is. And then, of course, having fun. Everybody is there to have fun, including the DM. Which is can be challenging from a DM perspective because, like I said, you're herding cats. You know, you've got the bigger the table, the more voices are there, the more you have to share the spotlight, the more you have to kind of crunch what everybody's doing down in a reasonable time and say, okay, you're going to roll this, you're going to do that, you succeed, you fail, or whatever, and then play it out. So, you know, just making sure everybody's having fun, and that is definitely comes into your soft skills, like learning to, like I said, read the table, read the room. There are safety tools and such for that, but you know, as long as everybody seems to be having a good time,
yeah,
you know, all's fair. And I'm a rule of cool DM, so if you want to try to fly, I'll let you try.
You try something.
I'll let you try.
And let you live with the consequences of your choices.
Yep. So how does this work? So we kind of went into a little bit how it works, which is the scenario. I would present as a DM what the room looks like, what is happening. You see 12 bandits standing on the side of the road. They're holding up a carriage. They've got crossbows pointed at, you know, the caravan guards. What are you guys going to do? Then it comes to the oh, go ahead, Bethany.
I was going to say, and you would expect, at least I have run a similar scenario with Rachel as a player, and I thought, okay, they will plan to like sneak up and attack the bandits or something like that.
No.
Instead, they went and offered the bandits better employment than a life of banditry, and decided they have enough funds to hire them, because truly no one would pick the bandit life if they were not facing economic hardship. And that was really successful and unexpected.
Yes, exactly. So that's the one thing is response can be it can be violent. You can choose violence in the games. Most of the time, there are some systems that don't let you, but there are ones that there are opportunities to try diplomacy, or perhaps you want to try just making a distraction and like scaring them off. So there's options. A great example like Bethany had is like we offered employment when I ran a somewhat similar scenario for some of my students. Mind you, they were 13 years old. They decided that they wanted to just pay the bandits the toll that was being asked, which was some extravagant amount, like 20 gold, and they had like 4 between the 3 of them. So they borrowed money from the merchant that they were escorting, paid off the bandits, walked on past, and they were like, wait a second, those are bad guys. And I'm like, you still get experience for overcoming the obstacle, which is the resolution. So there's, you can do, like I said, diplomacy, you can do violence, sneaking, however you approach it. But then you come to the resolution where if you're trying to talk to them, maybe you make like an intimidation roll or persuasion roll. As the DM, I would know what that goal is on the D20, which I had somewhere around here. And you roll your, yep, like Julie's holding up. So you roll your dice, and then if you have a modifier, you get to add that or take it away if you have a negative modifier. And then, so if the goal is a 16 and you roll a 17, you succeed. If you roll on the dice a natural 20, you super succeed. Things go all in your favor. It definitely works. If you roll a 1, that's a crit fail. You super fail. Bad things happen, or fun things happen. We like to fail forward. So it just tells you how well you did it.
Yeah, I would like to point out that one of the early sessions where I was running a game and Rachel was playing in it, due to some bad rolls, she ended up stabbing 2 fellow party members with javelins in separate incidents.
And knocking them both unconscious.
They were fine. Everyone was fine afterwards, but they
put some band-aids on them. They're good.
And then they were like, no more javelins. So the rest of the whole game, which ran for like 5 years, they were like, no javelins. If we see a javelin, we will remove it.
It was brutal.
Too dangerous.
It was so brutal. So
all right, so we'll try to share some examples throughout. I think it makes it a little bit more practical, and also we love sharing our stories from our games. It's part of the experience. So just a little bit about unleashing gaming skills for communication mastery. We thought we'd give some examples that are practical from real experience beyond those little snippets. So I think Julia is going to go first and share a little bit about her experience playing D&D for the first time and how that led to her article for Intercom.
I think the first thing that happened was, I want to write something. I don't know what to write. Bethany, give me ideas. So you had the idea, well, kind of want to do a Dungeons and Dragons thing, but I don't know how. First step, plan a game, play the game, then write the thing. So, played the game. The basic scenario was a bookshop owner, her cat went missing, and we had to go figure out, okay, what happened? Where's the cat? And why can't she just be in the bookshop with her cat? So we interviewed her like you would do a SME interview. Then we went to the location, started an investigation, which I suppose is kind of like playing with whatever object or code you have to work with. And once we figured it out, we also discovered there was a monster hiding in her shop. So with some injuries, we did eventually defeat the monster, and we saved the cat. Everything was good. The shop owner got to go home. and just live with her cat.
The cat was just hiding.
Yep.
So you mind sharing a little bit about the intercom article, and I will grab the link for it to share in the chat.
I'm pretty sure I wrote first a long form article for memo to members, which you can find through the ideas page I already linked. And then I had to edit it down a lot for intercom because they have a shorter word count limit. But it was a good way to say, you can take anything, any hobby, even if it doesn't seem like it would be comparable to TechCom, and make it about TechCom. You just have to spin it the right way. Speaking of, if I may just do one last promo. If anyone wants to do that for their hobby and write for memo to members, I will not say no. Please give me stuff to publish.
Julia is a very nice person to work with. She's a very kind editor. Cannot recommend strongly enough. Also, then it's great for your portfolio. So, Rachel I asked to share a little bit about her, I call her mentoring case study. I thought that sounded very grand because I know you've done a little bit experience working with materials for a tabletop game in your mentoring.
Yeah, so we decided that, so Dominic, if you don't mind me calling you out, I'm working with Dominic. And yeah, he's been writing up a module, and I would say it started very light, where I just presented, there's D&D. He'd never played it. I kind of pitched the overall idea. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Dominic, you seemed mildly interested, but not gung-ho towards the tabletop idea. But it wasn't till I was like, well, you don't have to do fantasy. There's everything out there. Maybe we can find something that you are also interested in. So that's kind of the first step is, he was sort of my audience, and I was pitching these things to him, trying to figure out what interests him, what we wanted to work on for our project. And it turns out that Dominic is a big fan of SCP, which is Secure, Contain, Protect.
That's it.
Okay. I'm like, do I get that right? Okay. And it's the tagline, general sense, is there's anomalies out in the world, and you have to go in and either capture, contain, or destroy them. And there's like a whole world. There's a lot of lore about it. And there's a tabletop game written for it. So once we narrowed that down, Dominic started working on the module that I will hopefully in the near future run. And that started off very storyboard, very linear, and very much like a script. And I think over the months, we've realized that Dominic's impression of what he would be writing was very much a story versus a toolbox. So he had to do a lot of kind of refining what he was working on, which is defining who his audience is, which the audience for what he's writing is not the players, it's the GM, which is a very different content bundle that you want to provide, because the players are there to play and they are not going to do anything that's like prescribed in what he writes. So what he has to write is for me, which is as I call it, the toolbox. He has to provide me all the tools to be able to sit down at the table and run it for my players and hope that I have everything I need when they go off the rails, because they will not stay on the rails, as anybody who's GM'd knows. So
sure.
Yeah, so it's just been really interesting, kind of taking a look at what are players interested versus what are GMs interested, doing a lot of discussions about that and how to refine what you're writing for your audience. So I think that's how it really has honed Dominic's view of gaming. And I can't wait to run it. So
it sounds like a great topic for an intercom article.
It might be. And for reference, anybody who wants to play, we'll be looking for play testers.
Maybe do some recruiting. It seems like you have a good potential audience here.
Hey.
All right. So I know we've talked kind of generally with some specifics, but now we're kind of gonna dive a little deeper into what I'm calling the treasure trove, the specific skills for D&D that you can use in professional life. So really trying to get into how we could tie all of this to TechCom, because I didn't just pitch this because I like to talk about D&D. I do like that, but I also have a podcast, so I could talk about D&D all I want in my free time. But I think that technical communication is a field that is often misunderstood. And I think it's great to be able to connect with people and show like how our skills are relevant in other applications as well. So I won't go into reading you the slide, but we're going to cover all of these interconnected things, which is the nature of our work. As we were talking about before the presentation started, writing is just one piece of what we do, and wanted to sort of dive into what that looks like connecting to D&D. So we'll start with writing and editing. We know that strong writing skills are essential. We need to be able to write things that are clear, concise, and well structured, that can be understood by our audience, like Rachel was saying. And then we need to be able to edit and review and revise and create good content. So in D&D, clarity is very important. As Rachel was kind of mentioning in devising a system for a GM, anything you put into anything you're creating should be immediately clear to the players what it means. Now, you can't account for every audience in just your original writing. Sometimes people will have unexpected interpretations, but sometimes your scenario, the most compelling ones, are very straightforward. I will say, having run a game for some of our technical writers who are here for FTC, to start their adventure, they needed to climb down a rope that was in a big hole. And I'm really glad I'd prepared my big hole description, because they wanted to know everything and understand, how wide is this hole? Can I see the bottom of this hole? I want to know more about the rope. How is it secured? Lots and lots of questions that need to be clear. Also, it need to be accurate. So if I was describing a place or a person or a thing, they need to be able to visualize it, or at least understand how it relates. You don't want to be sort of fudging things too much. A little bit does happen, but I know this. Rachel has been my player who catches me when I have not prepared something, and she's like, "Hold on a second, that doesn't make any sense." And I go, "Yep, you caught me. You and your note taking, catching my inconsistencies."
An addition to the accuracy thing and the clarity is for anybody who is interested in writing a module, if you don't want your players to ask at every single door whether it opens towards them or away from them, or how high the ceilings are, or what the walls are made of, just put a little note in there that says, tell your players this up front. It will save you so much time.
Yes, we've spent a lot of time talking about doors.
How high are the roofs? Which way do the doors open?
What tools can I use in the door? What kind of lock is this?
What is the handle like? Is it a lever or a round knob?
How heavy do you think that door looks like it is? Can I determine that?
There's so many door questions.
Yeah. So I know we mentioned having a lot of detail, but also brevity is important. This is something I've talked about being one of my weaknesses. I would call conservation of detail being important. You don't want to tell your players, or if you're writing your users, anything they don't need to know, because they'll assume that everything you include is important, right? If it's in there, it must be relevant. And I put as my example one that's another, yeah, Rachel gets to hear me admit to all of my faults. I was running a module and I just read the text as it was written, and it mentions that there's like a hole in the wall. Like they're in like this magma underground lair thing, and it's just like you go in a cavern, there's a clear tunnel out, and then there's just sort of like this hole in the wall. And I read a short description for like the dimensions of it, and they're like, this is the most important thing. This hole. Forget the obvious tunnel over there. We need to figure out what's up with the hole. And I'm like, don't worry about the hole. The hole is nothing. And they're like, no, we don't care what you say. You're trying to trick us. The hole is everything. It was purely there, I think, to be described as like a vent, but the fact that it was there was assumed to be incredibly relevant by the players. And as soon as I'd done it, I realized my mistake. So don't provide details people don't need. It will make them waste their time, because they'll assume everything is relevant. I also put in here storytelling, and I'll have to tell on myself here. I put craft clear and concise narratives. So that's in your documentation and in your writing for D&D. I think I'm a pretty good editor when it comes to technical documentation. I've tried to get better at editing my D&D campaigns. Sometimes you have lots of ideas and you want to include everything, but the best thing you can do is edit and focus and not throw everything into your narrative blender, because the longer you play a game, the more chaotic and confusing it will get. And players will ask you about, oh yes, do you remember this guy from 2 years ago? I'm like, yes, of course I remember this guy. Let me go look in my Google Doc. So hopefully I took good notes. Yes, I've also mentioned Rachel is a good note taker. It's one of her greatest strengths and her things I fear most having her as a player because she doesn't lose track of stuff for very long and comes back to check on things.
But it should also be noted that while I do take a lot of notes, they aren't always accurate.
That's true.
I try
yes.
very hard, but we do have Grindo incidents.
Yeah, Rachel, I think we have to do brief
So,
sideline for storytelling.
Brief sideline. We met a gentleman named Grindo. We rolled to see how hot he was. He was nat 20 hot, very hot guy. I had written in my notes for some weird reason that he was a half orc. So for like 2 years in real life playing, I thought he was a half orc, me player. Yeah, it turned out he was a human, and it came about when they're like, "Oh, we need somebody who can speak Orcish." I'm like, "Oh, Grindo can because he's half orc," and they're like, "No,
he's just like a little
just
scrawny human man,
very nice looking." But
and you're
scrawny.
like, "No, here, it's in my notes.
It's
the
in
notes
my
are
notes.
truth."
And I don't know what happened. Somehow I wrote half orc. So.
Yes, it did. John put D&D catfish.
Yeah,
but it was self catfishing.
Self catfishing. So
yeah, sometimes compelling stories happen on their own, but right, keeping things clear and concise as much as possible is one of the strongest things I recommend. And Rachel is going to share with us a little bit about how SME interviews relate to Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. So interviewing, obviously, when you are interviewing for work, it's much more focused, you could say. You're going with the intention to ask specific questions about your product or the device or whatever it is. In D&D, the interviews are more lighthearted, more informational about what's going on in the scenario and in the scene. And sometimes they can be really, really, if you look at it, very simple. What are you doing? What do you want to do? What do you want to try to do? Or it can be very, what are you thinking? What does your character feel in this moment? They just saw like their best friend married to this evil person and now they're being taken to Bowser's castle. I don't know. So, there's all sorts of levels of interviewing. And that comes to the questioning. And as a DM, it's very important for questioning your characters and players about what is happening. You want to get a clear picture of what they're trying to do so that you can decide what they need to roll or how the NPC would react. There's any number of times where a player says, "Oh, I want to do this," and I don't clarify what this is. And so my idea of how that NPC reacts is vastly different than if they're doing this versus this. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's very different than how I was picturing it. So you need to make sure you ask clear enough questions that you get the right answers to keep things moving along. Same goes for interviewing your SMEs. If you need to know what is your, I don't even remember, like what is a part number? You can't just say, what is this? You say, I want this part number. Because if you say, what is this? It's a screw that, uses a number 2 Phillips screwdriver or something. You're like, no, I need the part number. Let me clarify. And then relationship building. So at the table, there is kind of an unwritten etiquette rules and how people, as a person sitting at a table, you want to be treated. Same goes for work. You don't want to be, accosting your SMEs. However, I did put my note for was Andy and the Coke and Peanuts. So I had a SME when I worked at Lockheed Martin. He was an engineer, logistics engineer, and very early on, I went over and I noticed he had like a Diet Coke and peanuts, on his desk. And we were just chit chatting about some stuff, not super friendly yet. He's just very short. Here's what you need. Here's how you get it, blah, blah, blah. So then one of the next times, because I knew he would be a very important person, I took a Coke and some peanuts. And I was like, here, I have brought an offering. Those also work really well for DMs. I have brought cake to the game, so it just helps to treat people in general, but also, when you're working really close with them, if you want and need information or you want and need a specific thing to happen in the game, the more pleasant of a person you are, the easier it's going to be for them to work with you. And it just works really well for everybody to get what they need and want at the table or at your job, by just being a generally nice person and building good relationships. And snacks
And
are always great.
snacks are great. It's the only thing that's a disappointment about playing online is you have to bring your own snacks, which we also do. And then you eat them crunchily in front of your microphone.
Yeah.
No, you mute because you want to be a nice person.
True.
So I want to talk a little bit about information design and organization. So as technical communicators, we should have the ability to organize and present information in a logical and structured manner. So think about the principles of information design, like hierarchy, consistency, headings, tables, visuals. All of these things are present in the manuals and all the various Dungeons and Dragons materials or other systems things you might read. Of course, Rachel and I have had many talks about how we would change the design of many of those materials. I think that technical writers could do better. We're very particular about font choices as well. But thinking about having a logical progression. So in a game, when you're playing with characters, they are designed to level up. They gain experience, they get better, they get new items, they get new materials. And if you're running a long-term campaign, the same way you sort of structure information and think about hierarchy, what are the things that need to happen first? How do you build on that? You do that for a campaign as well. I also do a lot of documenting for my campaigns. I mentioned Google Docs. I have Google Docs on Google Docs on Google Docs for games that I have run. And I try to make sure those are extremely well organized so that when someone asks me about something from 2 years ago, I can go and look it up. It also helps to have visuals. I would say it depends on the player. We also see different learning styles come into play: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, but having things to show players. This is what the monster looks like. Here he is in comparison to your characters. Oh no, he's 6 times as big as us. Why is he so large? Even though he's a turtle. That sort of thing. Having a sense for how to show scale and how things are related to each other is really helpful. I also put effective use of visual aids. This is something I've always wanted to do better, and I'm gonna highlight Rachel as someone who's done really well. So she's done a lot of fun visual aids for games, like whether that's you've been invited to a mysterious manor. Here's your invitation. It has a wax seal. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never been so compelled to go to this manor, even though this is clearly a trap.
Yeah, nothing will get your players to show up to a very clearly laid trap as a well-made visual aid.
Yes.
Hands down every time.
It's our only weakness, or at least it's one of our most prominent ones. Well, the paper this is nice quality paper. But also it's come up in game, and it's something I've enjoyed seeing playing with technical writers. Like, and one of the long-term campaign I ran that Rachel was a player in, they started in a small town that the written material that I was running, which was a book called Prince of the Apocalypse, assumed you would start in that town and perhaps never return. This did not happen in my game. They met the people of the town. They became charmed. They were invested. They recruited the bandits to work there. They, wanted to see it become more of a thriving hub because the marketplace was in disarray. So they decided to make a brochure that they could hand out on their journeys to help promote the town. I won't say this is normal for all Dungeons and Dragons players, but it's a great place to get to be fun and creative. That you might not get to necessarily every day on the job, to do something that helps connect storytelling to visuals to design. So it's something to keep thinking about as you're potentially developing materials as a dungeon master or as a player.
I'll also add in that it does help bring the world alive when you let your players add in those weird little details that you're like, you want to make brochures for, okay, you know what? Cool, do it. Let's do it. It does help add color to the world and make it feel more of like a lived in and breathing world versus just like a backdrop. And if your players are invested in it, then they're going to protect it. They're going to want to see it grow. They're going to have spreadsheets that calculate the income and profits and where their building materials are going.
Decide to run democratic elections, the things that you don't
hire
anticipate.
some aerial scouts to keep an eye on the skies for us. We had everything.
It was a great game. But yeah, definitely there are things that you can apply that also relate to work. And I think it's a great place to really push your skills to get to do something you wouldn't normally get to do, because normally our work can be very structured and constrained. So it's a way to do something fun and sort of hone those skills. So I put critical thinking and problem solving, which I would say at its core, aside from the storytelling, is what you do in Dungeons and Dragons. As a dungeon master, you present scenarios and people respond to them. So I kind of wanted to break down what I thought was the overlap between the process in playing D&D and solving a problem, going on a quest, and then finding, innovative solutions in tech comm. So we always start with identifying the problem. In D&D, this could be we need to find the location of a lost treasure, or the identity of this mysterious villain, or the solution to a puzzle. And in TechCom, this could be identifying the needs of your users, the requirements, or determining what's the right deliverable to communicate a complex idea. To do that, you also need to gather information. So that would help you solve it. In D&D, this is usually starts with talking to NPCs, the people who are giving you your quest or the people they send you to. Oh yes, there was that mysterious man at the tavern, trails off in a sinister way, something that you'll follow up on. It also could be, starting to explore where dungeons might be located that might provide information. So TechCom, this is where you're getting into your SME interviews, conducting research, or creating samples even, to see if people respond to those positively when you're trying to develop something new. You also need to do analysis for possible solutions. So in D&D, this is like considering the strengths and weaknesses of your character, your party members, and the challenges you face. If you are maybe not the most physically strong, maybe you're all really good at magic, but really not great at like physical confrontations. You might think twice before trying to go head to head with a large monster. You might decide to do something a little more clever. So you want to try to see what's going to be the right way to address that challenge that will let you leverage your strengths, or at least minimize your weaknesses. In TechCom, this is looking at the needs of your audience and really reviewing those requirements and seeing how they apply to what you're trying to communicate or document. So is what you're doing the right solution for your message? Once you've done all of that, you need to choose your solution. So D&D, this is weighing the risks and benefits. You're like, we know what our strengths and weaknesses are. We've narrowed it down to these 2 or 3 things. Having played with some creative players, sometimes they're like, we've narrowed it down to these 7 possible options, of which I might have anticipated 3 as the person running the game. And, then start looking at the resources. What is going to be most likely to be effective? Or in some cases, I'll be honest, which will be the most fun and hopefully also effective. It's a bit of a, of a formula to determine. So at TechCom, that's you're really at that point trying to make sure that what you're producing is going to be clear and concise and meet your audience's needs, and pick that above all else. You also have to take into account, when do you need to deliver this? Our favorite way of determining what's going to be successful. When is it due? So that's another thing you need to consider. Also at D&D, sometimes you are against the clock and you have to pick something that will let you move quickly. I like the idea of just saying implement the solution. It sounds very simple and clean. But this is where you actually do the thing. So in D&D, this is where you're actually going to fight that monster, or you're actually going to solve that puzzle, or go into that dungeon to retrieve the artifact, whatever it takes to complete your quest. This is where like the heart of the game is after you've done all of your setup work. And this is where you're really going to find out how is it going to go. If you've done your job well, you'll be very successful. I've been talking about playing with players of, who are technical writers. Overall, I think technical writers are very successful because they do a great job at the first 4 steps. Some people, when they're playing games, they kind of just jump to 5 and just do a thing. Nothing wrong with that, but I think it highlights kind of a different way of approaching things. So in TechCom, when you're implementing, that's where you're actually going to create the version of your material that you're going to send out or publish, or whatever mechanism you use to sharing it with your customers or stakeholders, or if it's a training program, administering that, sharing your presentation, whatever the deliverable is, this is where it happens. And then the last, I want to make sure you're talking about evaluating the solution. In D&D, this doesn't always happen, but everyone I played with does this. They love to do a lessons learned. Like, okay, we went in with this plan. What went right? What went wrong? Okay, let's be honest. We talk about what went wrong first every time. Okay, we had this great plan, and then someone rolled poorly, or there was an element we didn't entirely anticipate, or it was just something unexpected. And then seeing what went well. What can they celebrate? What were the strengths? What could they do going forward that would make the team even more successful? So what can you learn from the experience? because that's part of what you're getting out of the game. Ideally, the way it progresses, you get better at it, not just your character, but you as a player, the more you play. For TechCom, this is, actually doing analysis on your work. If you're lucky, you have analytics, did people use your material? Or you can do surveys to see if people actually have anything to respond. I know often we don't get any feedback outside because we have the no news is good news approach to many of our documents. We send them into the world, and if no one says anything, we assume they are happy because few people take the time to say how wonderful your documents are if they are meeting their needs. But anything you can do to gather feedback from your stakeholders is helpful. The other things you can look at are, was your project completed on time? Did you use the number of hours or resources you might have anticipated? And did it meet all of the other goals? All right, I'm pausing to have a drink of water. I'm sorry, I talked for too long without pausing. Rachel's saying no. No water. Keep talking. I wanted to get a little further into the idea of user personas and audience analysis because I think this is something that's interesting in TechCom. It's probably more common for people who are working in technology or in like software development, but can be applied in different disciplines. So we've mentioned kind of Rachel saying like you need to know your audience, how to meet their preferences, tailor to their needs. So this is kind of like drilling down into how to do that. So you kind of start with creating user personas. In D&D, that's considering the character's background, but personality, goals. So if you're a dungeon master, you're thinking, what would my players like to do? I love doing this. It's super fun. I love thinking about what things they'll make them successful and let them have a good time, put them in peril, but not too much peril. They should be able to be successful. And when you're working in developing documentation for software, sometimes user personas are provided for other departments, but it's an analysis of who are your customers, who's going to actually use your product, your documentation, who are you writing for? Sometimes you have to kind of do this on your own to sort of figure out based on any other documentation you have of who you're producing content for. But anything you can do to put that together. If you are so lucky as to be able to talk to your audience or people who talk to your audience, you can conduct an audience analysis. So often we don't have direct access to the people who use our documents if they're like end users for a product, but we can talk to people who do interact with them, whether that's project managers or customer service reps, and looking at what things do people submit tickets for that are problems? Where can we help close gaps? Where do we see pain points? So sometimes you don't get to go about this directly, but you kind of have to infer it. And for D&D, I think a lot of this is kind of going back to what Rachel was saying about asking the right questions. You want to see people be successful with what you're producing. So you try to get at the heart of what they're looking for as much as possible. I also have, of course, create user stories. This is specifically about the steps that have to be taken to achieve a goal for software. This is what does the product need to do, meet the audience's need. This could be for designing an actual like for code and that sort of thing if you have tickets, but it also could be for documentation. What are the things that people need to be able to do to use our user guide? What tasks are they going to complete? It's sometimes you're lucky to have material to work from. Other times you have to be the user. As I've talked about with Rachel, we love clicking on things. Nothing makes us so happy as going into a user interface and seeing what we can break. Mm-hmm. So using that is the way to determine what's going to be successful.
I have a good quick little thing about knowing what they're going to be and how they're going to be using our documentation. I was in a meeting years ago at Lockheed Martin, sitting around the table with a bunch of, I'm a little level 1, that got a bunch of level 5 and got people from the military. And my smart little self, raised my hand and they're like, yeah. I'm like, if the documentation's like on the system, and the system doesn't turn on, how are they going to get to the troubleshooting sections? And just, seeing all these like high level engineers, like their jaws just like hit the table. They're like, oh, good point. Yeah. Like they hadn't actually considered that because, one of the steps of the troubleshooting is like the system won't turn on. Okay. But if it doesn't turn on, you can't actually get to the guides that are installed on the system. You see the problem, right? So understanding, what all is your guide encountering or including and how are they going to be accessing it? It's very important because otherwise we would have sent out this huge system with, thousands upon thousands of like pages and hours of documentation. And then if it didn't turn on, they wouldn't have been able to troubleshoot why it wouldn't turn on.
They'd have to ask a human being and like
They have to call us up and go, hey, we have a problem. So
yeah, that's a great example. And I think one of the things that we're kind of highlighting as a thread through this, aside from the creativity for playing these sort of games, is you spend a lot of your time thinking about other people's perspectives. And I think it's great for teaching empathy, but also, to bring it back to TechCom, for helping you think about the audience. So when instead of user stories, I write, of course, scenarios when I'm running a game. So who's presenting this quest, what are their motivations, what are their reasons, what would make the party successful, like what do they want them to achieve, is it return the artifact, but let's also be specific, return the artifact intact, and having it really clear what the success criteria are that need to be met in order for the party to receive their reward for completing it. Because they will do whatever they can to meet it, but sometimes things happen along the way, so you want to know what they're looking for. And last, I put design user experiences. So not always do we get to have direct impact on our products, especially for those of us working in software. But if we do, I think it's a strength of technical communicators. Something I'm grateful to get to do in my current work is actually give some feedback on the UI. So things like the text, the labels, and think about how people are going to interact with the software so that the user knows when they get there what they need to do. We know they'll still need documentation, but the more we can do the heavy lifting in the user interface to make things clear, then it reduces some of the pain and stress for the user. When it comes to D&D, sort of everything is a user experience. You're designing everything, the world, the NPCs, how it reacts. You run it all, for good and bad. It means in some ways a great amount of control and creativity. You could present anything to your players, but it also means sometimes you want to be really specific about what's happening so the players aren't forced to choose a particular way of acting, but have a clear sense of what they want to do. One of the stories, I'm going to refer back to the same campaign. The characters, the party were visiting a cloud giant castle, which is just like a floating castle on a magical cloud. It's Dungeons and Dragons, it's fantasy. Roll with me. And their castle was being attacked by some, I believe, feral dragons. And they were able to go to the edge of the castle and mount a defense. So it was pretty clear on what they had as their goal. And what would make them successful and what they needed to do. They need to repel the dragons in some method. They chose a variety of different options. My favorite was, we see there are some very large rocks here. How strong would I need to be to lift these very heavy rocks? I'm like, you want to throw rocks at the dragons? Yes. Yes, that is what we want to do. You are not strong enough to lift those rocks. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, the response is, actually, I happen to have a magical potion that gives me the strength of a giant. So I am going to take said potion so I can lift this giant-sized rock and throw it at the dragons. I'll let Rachel share briefly how that went.
Phenomenal. I only dropped one rock on one party member, but the rest of the time it went great.
And he was okay afterwards.
He was okay afterwards.
He just got a little bit crushed.
A little bit squished.
But it was a great session because they felt that they had tools available that would let them be successful, but they weren't constrained to interact with the situation in a particular way. Because that's the challenge, of course. You want people to have freedom, but not so much freedom that they're like, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and I would like to point out that the reason, so my character was afraid of heights and flying. So there was a reason she wanted to stay on the ground, whereas the other players were given the option to ride griffins, I think. So yeah, so we had, people on mounted aerial combat stuff, and then you had me hucking rocks from the side. And, it's just, we were able to play to what our character's strength was in that moment. Or, failed playing to their strength by dropping rocks on our friends. But that's besides the point.
It was only one rock that landed on an unintended target.
Yeah. The rest all hit pretty well, I think.
But for me, that was a really satisfying session to run because everyone felt empowered to do something that they wanted to do and that they knew what steps they could take to accomplish those tasks. So I think that's something to bear in mind. Of course, going back to the user personas, not all of our users are the same person and you can't anticipate everything a person will do, but to give thought to what they're trying to accomplish and what their constraints are, what their challenges, and sort of design that into your documentation and process as much as you can. All right, I would hand to Rachel to talk a little bit about collaboration.
Yeah, so collaboration. Obviously, at a D&D table, you are collaborating. It's a collaborative storytelling game. So there's a lot of things that come into play, such as active listening, which as a GM, it's very important to work on active listening because you want to listen to what your players are telling you, not just with their words, but also with their tone. That does help you kind of read the room and understand. Just like when you're listening to your users or your SMEs, maybe you want more information and they're very short with you. Maybe they have a deadline that you don't know about. So, you want to be able to understand what's being said as well as how it's being said. Teamwork, obviously, at the table, you're all in the same party. You're all trying to, like Bethany said, get to the same place, accomplish the same goals, maybe different methods. But, you are working together. You need to have teamwork. Whether you're working with your engineers or you're working with, the graphic designers who are creating your graphics or, the developers who are writing the code, like just being a little bit flexible to give them what they need as well as taking what they're offering for you when they have it. Facilitation. So sometimes we work with people who are less than stellar at using the same tools as us. I work with SMEs who use Madcap Contributor, and I use Flare. It's not super different than maybe your Word or some of your other programs, but it's just different enough that some of them do have difficulties. And probably I'd say once a week, I get a call. Hey, this isn't saving right. Hey, this isn't, looking correct. Can you help me out? What's going on? You have to be able to facilitate those kind of meetings and like step up and help them with the tools just as much as they're helping you with the content you need to create. Obviously in D&D, you're running the table, you're facilitating the story and everything that's happening in the chaos at the moment. Conflict and diplomacy, I think, kind of go together because the conflict at the table or, in the workplace, it can be really, really small as, you just don't see eye to eye. Somebody uses 7 levels of bullets and you only want 4. So you maybe have to be diplomatic in your approach to reining that in. Just like in D&D, you have your teams that are working. There's a conflict. Maybe it's 2 sides, political sides are kind of going at each other, and you have to step in and play your diplomacy card and try to get them to come to some kind of word starts
Resolution.
Resolution, compromise. That's the word I was thinking of. Yeah. So you just have to, sometimes put on your diplomacy hat to help resolve things, maybe in a way you don't want to, but in a way that works and gets everybody to where they need to be. Especially as I put deadlines and dragons, you have to work with those. Bethany knows.
I love deadlines and dragons. It makes it sound way more cool.
Way more cool
with than just deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
Should I hit the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So joining future quests, we've given you some insights, some tools. I'm assuming you are all 100% sold and you're like, where do I start playing? Or where could I start playing if I decided I want to? Because I'm still thinking it over. There's lots of places you can play. If you are wanting to play in person, you can go to your friendly local game store that often have signups for like the Adventurers League, which is a structured method of playing D&D. I don't know that I recommend that for new players, to be honest, because you will be playing. Yes,
I will say it is a good way to learn, though, and it's a good way to progress.
Yes, yeah. I wouldn't do it for your very first game ever, though, because you might. It depends on who you would be playing with.
Right. Go with a buddy.
Yeah, I would say take a friend.
Take a friend.
Yeah, exactly. You can also sign up to play online. So what we'll be doing on Saturday is playing through Roll20. There are other virtual tabletops. So it's a way of simulating the physical space you would have where you roll physical dice in a virtual platform in a web browser. So you can roll your virtual dice. I know it lacks some of the immediacy of chucking a die all the way across your house and then spending like a week trying to find a D4, which is a die with 4 sides, the shape that Julia's showing, and wondering if your dog ate it None of my dogs have eaten a D4, but I did worry about it for several days one time. So you miss some of that by playing online, but especially during the pandemic, it was a great way to play. And also, there's a lot of people who will post looking for groups if they're looking to play something in particular and share about tone and talk about rules. And Rachel's mentioned safety tools. So those are like standards you have in place to make sure everyone's on the same page with what kind of content they're going to experience. So there's a lot of avenues there. However, to make it even easier, I know we have a lot of people already signed up. Oh no, I didn't go to that yet. Sorry, just a reminder. I'll go to about our game on Saturday. I switch the slides later. But I'm going to continue my sales pitch on why you should play. That's what I'm doing right now. So honestly, you'll have to learn the rules, learn what the dice mean, your abilities for your character, but the core skills that people struggle with the most in D&D, I think technical communicators already have. You know how to communicate with other people. You know how to work well with others, and you know how to tell a good story. These are things that are hard to learn. The rest of the stuff is pretty easy. It's rules. It's, in a sense, we're technical communicators. This is not as complex as most of the things we work on in our day jobs. So it's not going to be that much heavy lifting to get started. I hope people who have played with me will validate. Yes, there can be a lot of rules, but it's not that hard to get started. And again, I think it's a really fun way to get to interact and be a contributor in a collaborative environment. It's very like positive and affirming to feel like you get to participate with something, because honestly, depending on where you work and what your job is, sometimes technical writers can be, maybe not at the forefront and center of every single activity, so it gives you a chance to shine and be a part of something where you are all trying to succeed.
Yeah. And I'd also like to point out that it does, if all that doesn't sell you on it, it does also help, in my opinion, strengthen a lot of very soft skills. As Bethany mentioned earlier, empathy, kind of your leadership skills. If you're introverted, it will help you kind of come out of your shell a little bit and get used to dealing with lots of different people and personalities in a way that's a little bit more fun and less kind of imposing than at the workplace. You get to explore different facets of yourself. So if you create a character that's like really focused on your OCD, or it's this character really plays up X type of trait, it's a really good way to get to kind of explore sides of your personality, as well as a lot of soft skills, improv, and just creativity, anything that's can't really be taught.
Has to be experienced.
It has to be experienced. Working with people.
Absolutely. And I'm going to hand it back to Rachel for some further benefits of playing D&D.
Yes, as I just went over, actually, I didn't realize that was still a slide. I thought that one was
I'm sorry. We had some moving of slides. Apologies, everyone. We're very enthusiastic about the content.
We are. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a great way to express your creativity in a safe and supportive environment. In your day-to-day, you can't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. In D&D, you definitely can, and it lets you look at different skills as your character, like performance or stealth or something like that, and try to use those skills in like maybe non-traditional ways. It can help you develop your imagination, problem solving skills, and storytelling. Obviously, you're sitting around, you're coming up with these bizarre stories and rolling with it. Chance to practice technical communication skills, such as with your speech. I can speak, I swear. Verbal and written skills, especially if you're taking notes, you can improve, over the year. I've improved my note taking and come up with new ways to like tag the sides of my notebook so that I can find stuff quicker. So those are skills that have, kind of crossed over into everyday stuff. Chance and continuous learning. You're always learning new skills. You're learning new ways to kind of maybe get to where you want to go. Maybe not the straight way, but you might find, oh, well, I can still get to, this other thing by going this really weird roundabout way that works and is more fun. And it's a really good way to learn, like I said, a lot of those soft skills. I think it's one of the big key. And if you're not great at math, there is some math, so it helps with that. I did work with kids, so I have to pitch.
Or you can play online and it does the math for you.
No. Don't tell them. Okay, then you can learn how to program macros.
Yes, you can learn to program macros for a virtual tabletop, so it will do math and things for you.
Exactly.
This is true. A little bit of light programming. I didn't even mention that in the skills.
Exactly.
All right.
Covers everything.
So this is the slide I got ahead on. So if you are sold and you have not already signed up, you can join us this Saturday. We have 2 separate sessions. I will be running a learn to play workshop. So if you haven't played before or haven't played in a very long time and you want me to teach you how to play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, I recommend that you sign up. I think I put the link in the chat earlier, and I believe many of the names I see have already signed up, but I will put it again just in case someone hasn't gotten a chance to. And then for the other session, I mentioned my husband, Tony Aguad, who is an awesome dungeon master. He has completely different skills than I do as a dungeon master. He's really good at character voices, whereas I got to be honest, my characters, I'm not that great at voices. They all kind of sound like me. but that's okay. They have different hopes and dreams, and that's the most important thing. But Tony will be running a one shot, which is basically you run through a complete mini story in one session. So I know 1 to 5 looks like a long block of time. There of course will be breaks, but typically when you play D&D, you play for a block of time so you can get through an entire encounter or challenge or quest if possible. So that other game is called Journey to Witchlight Carnival. It should be lighthearted and fun, a little bit of challenge, nothing too spooky. And it's a great way if you played before. You do not have to be experienced. It would just, if you have some familiarity with the rules, that's really all you need, because Tony is happy to help along the way. And I believe Rachel will be participating to give some additional guidance as our most experienced veteran player and agent of chaos. So before we move to our Q&A, I'm going to hand it back to Julia for some final thoughts.
So to reflect on your own experiences, or in my case, my own, and identify what areas you can apply your Dungeons and Dragons skills. Be a way to learn about yourselves, your strengths and weaknesses. One thing that I learned, I like to stand in the back of the party and just shoot magic at the opponent. Firebolt is one of my favorite spells. I get to burn things with fire, but from a safe distance because my character doesn't have a lot of health or defense. So I'll let the melee folks be up front and I'll just cast spells in the back, and I like that. And you can identify areas where you can apply these same skills to your real world life. You can't really cast firebolts in real life, unfortunately. Can't do that, but can use those interviewing skills and the applying of details. There are various little notes about different spells and techniques within the game, which Roll20 keeps track for you. You don't have to memorize it, but you can use those details to say, wait, technically I can do this in this scenario, so I'm going to, because it would be fun. You can do the same thing in real life. You can become a more well-rounded and successful individual, taking the skills you learn or improve in Dungeons and Dragons and take them into either work life or just in your personal life.
All right. Thank you, Julia. So we have some time. We ran largely on schedule for some Q&A. So we are willing to accept questions on anything we have addressed within reason. So TechComm, D&D, those sinister 7 levels of bullets that Rachel mentioned earlier, anything like that. Feel free to unmute and ask, live, or if you're more comfortable, to put a question in the chat. Otherwise, we will share D&D stories until a question comes in. I'm giving
a
a pause.
non-D&D story I can share from last, was it Tuesday night that I sent you, Bethany?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm playing in a game. It's called Brindlewood Bay. The gist of it is you're little old ladies exploring murders and mysteries in your town of Brindlewood. Our particular story is that we are oh, I see there's a question.
Oh, yes. So both events are on Saturday, 1 to 5. So yes, they are running at the same time. So we recommend you select one, but I promise they'll both be fun.
Yes. So we're little old ladies. We were doing a hex files scenario. So we were exploring like a creepy town. And the the story, the way it works is you basically get a bunch of clues, and then you, as the players, kind of slap all the clues together and come up with what you think is happening, or what who the murderer is, how it happened, why they did it. And then you roll dice to see if you succeed or fail. We rolled really well. But the gist of our scenario is like a guy had land on where there had been rumors of like cursed gold. They dug it up. He made earrings for his wife. Then she mysteriously died. So then he was trying to use black magic and
As you do.
Science to like bring her back with government fund. He was using government funding. It was just this whole elaborate thing. We succeeded. Yay. And then we pretended to be the FBI and get him arrested. So, you want to know about stretching your imagination? We had 16 clues that we had to incorporate.
It's a lot of material.
It's a lot of clues, and we somehow made it work. But yeah, there was a dead body in the wall. There was a rat with a human face. So
sure, normal stuff.
We tied it all together.
Yeah, every game you play, you always have stuff that happens. You're like, this was very silly. And that's the thing that sticks with you. And you talk about it for years. Some of those things that I know Rachel and I are referencing that happened, those happened like 8 years ago in real world time.
Yeah.
But we still think about it because it was a great experience we shared. So pause again. Any questions? We're also willing.
How often do you play?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Kate?
How often do you play?
Oh, we used to play every week in person. I have a hard time imagining it.
Yeah.
Rachel, you play a lot more than I do. I play I'm currently not playing necessarily just D&D, but I play a couple of games like twice a month.
Yeah.
But for the STC FTC thing, sorry. We're doing that as scheduled. I would say quarterly, maybe. Would that be right? Julia can check me for when we're doing those.
Close enough.
Yeah. So sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, I play. So I play the Brindlewood game is twice a month. I play for the podcast once a month. If I can manage to jump into any other games, once or twice a month, and then I'm running a play-by-post game in a Discord. So, that one's I play like a cumulative maybe like an hour a week on that, just between like writing up my notes and then hopping in and like writing out what's happening for the players. But because that one's done over Discord and kind of throughout the day
asynchronously.
Yeah, because we do have one guy who's over in Germany, so he plays, he's 6 hours ahead, so he plays totally different time than we do. But that one, I would say I maybe put like an hour a week towards that. So it's not a lot, but it's enough that it keeps going, and, we trickle through the week. It's fun. I don't play enough. That's the real answer.
That's my thing. I feel like the universe is just pushing role-playing games in my direction, because I sort of got scooped into one a few months ago. It's not D&D, it's like a parlor game, I guess. They I never remember the name. The Masquerade, the Calgary.
Is it Vampire
the Masquerade?
Yes.
You're playing a LARP.
I know, I'm sort of closeted about it, but
sorry. No, sorry. Rachel has also played. Sorry, this is not a negative.
No,
this is not a negative thing. This is a safe space.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But I was, it was like, oh yeah, just come hang out on a Friday night, and it was very interesting trying to talk to people, knowing everything that we were talking about was made up and not real, and just trying to figure out how to, the very first time, navigate that environment was crazy. But anyway, that's a huge tangent off of that's twice a month, and you've totally sold me. I signed up on the form for tomorrow, or not tomorrow.
Saturday. Unfortunately, we have day jobs and we can't play Friday afternoons at the moment.
My brain's like, it's Friday. What are you talking about?
No, it's okay. You're like, we're so close. Let's just roll it over to Friday. It
Yeah.
happens to me all the time. I'm always trying to
Mhm.
turn Tuesday into Wednesday
Yep.
all the time.
Also, that sounds exactly like how I got to try my first LARP. Is a guy at my office was like leaning over his cubicle talking to the guy in that cubicle next to him, and they were talking about, I think they were talking about Magic the Gathering or something. But I was like, "Oh, you like games?" Just sidle up awkwardly. And he's like, "Oh yeah, we do like a LARP on, every Friday and Saturday or whatever, and you should come try it." And I was like, "I've never done one." Sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Definitely is a very different sort of mindset, but it does use a lot of the same skills when it comes, like, kind of boils down, your communication and um improv, all those.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, they are called storytellers, the people who run them.
Yeah, they are.
So
Awesome.
But the moral was, I have no time for this, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I know we have booked for Saturday a 4-hour thing. My main challenge has been time as well. I would like to play more often, but of course I do STC and volunteer, and I have pets and a husband who like me, so I don't get to play as much as I would like. But yeah, we play different things. So right now I'm running a cyberpunk game on some Saturdays. So for anyone who likes the cyberpunk aesthetic, that's a very different I would say theming, but everything else still applies. We still do all of the things that we
all
did.
of the chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Rachel's also in that game, and she always surprises me after all these years. I'm still like, this
Didn't
is
see
what's
that
happening.
coming.
Time to respond to the needs of my audience.
Mhm.
So I know we'll do another pause. Any other questions, or if you're looking for reassurance or anything about maybe playing sometime?
And I'll throw it out there for anybody who is running games. Your players will always choose the option you haven't accounted for. Always. You might have like notes and stuff that relate sort of adjacent to what they choose, but you almost will never know what they're going to pick. So don't rack your brain trying to go, oh, they're definitely going to go. No, they won't. That's the most logical. Definitely won't do it.
Dominic says still will try anyway. Oh no, does that sound like we're dissuading? Oh, you're still gonna try to anticipate.
Yeah, I know you will, Dominic.
Try to anticipate the options and leave things flexible enough to adapt to the needs of the situation. That's the challenge.
Mhm.
So I don't want to always keep harping for questions because we can talk all night. I see Lori's unmuting.
Hi, good to be here. Okay, I am probably one of like 3 people in the entire universe that has never played D&D, if you can believe that.
I can believe it, Lori. There are lots of
yeah.
people who have never played.
Oh, okay.
It's
Well,
okay.
what I was curious about was because, I'm not used to playing games online, but I'd like to kind of get some exposure to it. So my question is, I'm thinking about the people on kind of the bookends, ends of our culture, children on the one hand and older adults on the other hand. Um, can these games provide some good, I guess you would say, mental exercise, or like for children, for example, maybe it might help um, children build confidence, or for older people, it might help them, deal with like boredom or isolation or something like that. I was thinking because so many people who play these games are, in probably 20s and 30s, anywhere from 12 to 30, let's say. But, there are probably a lot of other people that might benefit from just the mental exercise alone, or just the companionship or whatever. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear it.
Rachel is kind of an expert on one of those audiences, so it's a great question, Lori.
That's a great question. And yes, it actually does. It's really great for kids. For reference, I did work for a couple years for a local nonprofit running after school programs where we did homework help and taught them to play and run D&D.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's wonderful. I've watched kids who come in and they're a little bit shy, a little bit introverted, but they have this idea that they want to run, and just kind of sit down and help them like build their little scenarios. It helps kids learn to kind of take a step back and not judge as quickly as well, because
Okay.
they're trying to be collaborative storytellers together. So you have to, there's a lot of, like I said, table etiquette. So I have a whole program that we did where it was
Wow.
a week-long program, and it went over, like day one was what is D&D, what is kind of the table etiquette, don't touch other people's stuff, don't shoot anybody's
Okay.
ideas down, everybody has a voice,
Yeah.
share the spotlight.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great for kids.
Oh,
And
that's terrific.
yeah, and it's wonderful because there are systems that are for younger kids. The youngest one off the top of my head is called Princesses and Palaces, and it's written, I believe, for 4-year-olds and up.
Okay.
And all it basically does is kind of take the whole grand idea of play pretend and put a little bit of structure to it.
Oh, okay.
So if your kid, like if you know kids who like to play pretend, you can definitely look this one up, and it's something you can do with them, and it helps adults kind of get down to their level, puts a little structure on it because adults like structure,
Okay.
helps
Yeah.
kids, rein in a little. I'm very passionate about. I love kids and playing games with kids.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah.
And something to note for Laura, you said you've never played. I probably would not have played when I was younger if Rachel had not invited me. There's a lot of
Wow. Okay.
historical, I'll be direct, there's a lot of historical misogyny in the tabletop role-playing space,
Oh,
where
yeah.
it was seen
Yeah.
as war games for men. So there was a lot of gatekeeping. Not that women didn't play and didn't participate, but there was a higher barrier to entry. So something Rachel and I've
Yeah.
talked about a lot
Okay.
is
Yeah.
how we're happy to see the hobby becoming much more inclusive and open. And a
Yes.
lot of that's through welcoming people to the hobby. That's partly why we're so excited to share it with people, because we think it's a great
Oh, okay.
way to spend your time, connect with your friends, meet new people, and that it's not a gendered experience. But
Yeah.
I know
Oh,
especially
okay.
for, that's why it's, if you see women who play, it's often younger women, because other women who might have considered playing had a bad experience and got turned off, or
Oh,
just were not
sure.
invited. That
Sure.
being the other piece. So I don't think there's any age restriction by any means. And we've
Well,
played with
that's
people of
great.
all ages
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, that's really wonderful because, I think that I think especially for older women and you know, everybody knows I'm not a spring chicken, but I think women of my generation sometimes see something like this as just play and there's work and there's play. And I think that something like this is not really solidly one area or another, because I think that especially for women, I think they need to feel that they can kind of combine mental stimulation with something that they enjoy, that is fun and kind of, a little bit not as serious as regular work tasks or whatever. So I see this as a really nice little gateway for women of all ages, but maybe for women of my generation, especially to see themselves more, comprehensively as not just someone who takes care of everybody else and does work all the time, but just, you know, finds different ways to have fun with their brain and fun with their mental capacities and things like that.
Yeah, something Rachel and I have talked about a few times is sorry, I'm not good. I'm soapboxing. Okay, I'll do it briefly. As women, we have a lot of pressure to be productive, right? In what we're doing. So
Yes.
outside of work, to be productive domestically, and when we have careers, to be doing a great job at our careers. I'm not saying that men don't have these pressures as well. I could just speak to the experience as a woman. But I think playing games like this, for me, it hits the sweet spot where I'm doing something fun that's freeing, but it's structured enough that I feel like I'm doing something meaningful for myself. So it doesn't
Yeah.
feel rudderless. I'm working,
Yeah.
I have goals to
Okay.
work towards with other people. And I find seeing others be successful very rewarding as a person.
Yes.
So it's great to be in a space where that's one of the goals, is to see other people be successful and to help enable them. So,
That's
so for me,
terrific.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's partly why I like it so much.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, I really appreciate all the knowledge. I mean, I know I came into this meeting very, very late, but you have a lot of experience in the gaming area. And I really appreciate the insights that you've shared just in the few minutes that I've been in this meeting. So thank you.
Of course. And I'll just drop my email in if you have any more questions or you want any more resources specifically.
Oh, thank you.
Feel free to and this goes for everybody. If you want to shoot me an email, I love talking about games. I love talking about gaming with kids. I love gaming. Game.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes left. I see Kate unmuted. Does that mean you have a question, Kate?
It wasn't a question. It was a
Oh.
comment about just some of the benefits as well. Again, not to D&D specifically, but I think it translates. Julia mentioned earlier, she kind of likes to stay in the back and throw fireballs from a safe distance, where I feel like that's more my real life character. So for my vampire, I made one that has no diplomacy and will just say, like, you're boring me, and walk away, because I don't feel like I have permission to do that in real life.
Yeah, certainly. Right. A lot of us. Yeah. Some of us play against type, and this is something. There is an archetype of party mom, so it happens a lot. Rachel, I've talked about where when you're playing, if you are a responsible person in your real life, you keep finding yourself being responsible in your fantasy life. So often we are trying to work against type, but it includes some great like self-analysis of like, what am I looking for? What do I enjoy, or what do I just feel are my obligations based on the dynamics I've established with the people around me, and gives you a chance to kind of change those, at least in the game.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we have time for like one more question or comment before we wrap up.
Games.
All right. Okay. So I'll ask for those who are comfortable to put in the chat. If you have been playing D&D or other tabletop role-playing games, how long has it been since you played your first game? I know we established our bona fides early. I'm curious. Rachel said 2005.
I was a senior in high school. My boyfriend invited me along.
Kept the hobby, ditched the boyfriend.
Yep.
I was going to say that, Bethany.
Kate says December.
Mhm.
Michael says many moons ago. Daniel, a few months ago, I had first grade. That's great,
Nice.
Daniel. Always happy to see new people start. There is no like, you're too old to play, or
Exactly.
or you need more knowledge. Dominic also same. Yeah, so great to see a lot of new people. Julia's got her specific date. How do you know? Did you check?
I went to our Discord from when we set that up.
Nice.
Wait, so that means it's like almost we're just past 3 years then, right? If that was May, oh my gosh. That was like early in the pandemic. Oh my gosh.
We couldn't leave our houses.
Yes, it was an interesting time. Hobbies were a way to connect. And Joy said first time was during FTC, but can't wait to play more. Well, thank you all for sharing that. I'm glad to see we have a breadth and depth of experience with gaming system. So just wanted to close by saying thank you so much to my co-presenters, Rachel Swartfeger and Julia Southwick, for sharing their knowledge and experience and helping welcome people to the hobby in the future potentially. And if not, we hope you just found this interesting, and we'll have a lens to kind of look at other hobbies and how you might apply the skills that you learn there to your technical communication and think creatively. So if you have not already, just a reminder that game is on Saturday, 1 to 5, or the Learn to Play workshop. And we would be happy to see you there. But if not, we hope to host some more games in the future, typically with the Future Technical Communicators Student Club. So
1 to 5 Eastern, in case there's anybody not in Eastern time.
Oh, good point. Lori is not, but I know she is kind and lets me translate it.
Yeah, I'm 3 hours ahead, so it's only 5:30 over here. So it's just around supper time here, and I know it's later for you. It's after dark for all you guys, or almost after dark. Yeah.
Yeah, it's night outside. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining the STC Florida chapter meeting. We hope you found it informational, entertaining, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you at a future meeting in June. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
It was great. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Don't
Bye.
forget-
Michael.
And I wish